Hey everyone, I'm Katelyn Burns.
And I'm Christine Grimaldi.
And you're listening to Cancel Me Daddy,
the show where we take a closer look at all the panic around cancel culture.
With thoughtful analysis.
And verbal shitposting.
So Christine, do I even have to ask this week?
I think we do, just for the sake of giving people routines and comfort at this time.
Who are we canceling today?
The election.
Yeah. This is not the show I think that we thought we were going to be producing when we first planned this out.
I did not have the hubris I had in 2016. I really thought that would go differently. But I did think this would go differently too, if only because of how just fucking pathetic he looked in that debate.
The debate, he was just kind of standing around on stage, dancing to music for half an hour. It was I think the people that voted for him were clearly tuned out. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today with the one and only cancel Gunkle, Michael Hobbes. And everyone laughs every time I call him that, including him. So this is good.
We need the cancel Gunkle today.
Yeah. So, we're going to give you some fresh election takes. I don't think any of us stand by any of it because everything is in motion and happening all at once. And the only conviction I have is that trans people didn't lose this election.
Trans people did not lose this election.
I mean, we lost the election, but we didn't lose the election. You know what I mean?
We are all losers in this election.
Our last episode is called the daddy election, and it should have been the loser election. Maybe this episode should be called the loser election.
Oh, yeah. I think you got something there, Kate.
Joining us now is everybody's favorite cancel Gunkle, Michael Hobbes.
I forgot about that. It's been too long.
We have Michael Hobbes, co-host of the Maintenance Phase and If Books Could Kill podcast. Michael, how are you doing?
I was thinking what we should do for this episode is just an hour of long, heavy sighs and just no actual talk and just or yep. That's the whole episode.
That sounds
this
very
is basically how I've
internet.
been. Just be like, if only. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe it won't. Oh, yeah, it will. Okay. Because I'm struggling to say anything remotely interesting or insightful about what just happened. And the data that we have is incomplete and preliminary and exit polls are always fucking wrong. But that's all we have to go on. And everybody's takes are bad, including mine. It's just what are we doing here? And no one really knows anything what's going to happen until, January 20th when they take over. So it's 3 months of just stress and anxiety and uncertainty, which I wish I could fast forward through, but I also don't want to fast forward through because then we get to the bad part.
Yeah, and this is the time where we really lay the groundwork to do the work that we're going to need to do. I'd say for the next 4 years, but yeah, I don't know if there's going to be another election. So we need to just lay the groundwork for the work we need to do right now.
Yeah, I think the most important thing right now is as much leftist infighting as possible. I think we want to get the Bernie versus Hillary 2016. Let's get that relitigated.
No,
let's relitigate the 2020 primary. Where are the Buttigieg bros? I want to see all the Buttigieg bros out. Let's just get everything out of our system and continue to do that for the following 4 years and the rest of our lives.
Back-to-back posts on Bluesky, I saw Bernie would have won. Mm-hmm. And then I saw Biden would have won. And I'm like, hell yeah. Holy shit.
Let's do it.
We're bringing back the classics.
I love arguing from a multiverse where if this had happened, she would have won and no one can prove anything. So all we can do is fight. It's like the would you kill baby Hitler dorm room conversation, but playing out in the national media, just I feel very strongly about this thing that didn't happen would have changed everything if it had happened. So.
I disagree with everybody. I think everybody should do what I'm doing right now, which is basically marathoning Mythbusters and playing Manor Lords.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. I found a guy called the Bob Ross of geology on YouTube. This old man who just walks around Nevada and he's look at these rocks. And that's all I've done. I've just mainlined this man.
I'm watching a lot of Elmo with my 2.5-year-old on YouTube, and I'm fine with that.
Let's stay here for the rest of the episode. What is everyone doing? Let's not talk about what just happened.
Well, I guess we have to talk about this at some point.
You already said you have issues with my skeets, so let's just dive in.
Jeez,
Mike,
okay.
all of your takes are trash.
No, I didn't say that.
I just want to say, starting off, I stand by none of my skeets. All of them are bad. So if you want to point out some specific ones that were bad, I probably agree with you.
Well, before we get into that, let's kind of set the stage a little bit, because I think that the topic that is hitting home most for me, obviously, as a trans person, is the blaming trans people for the election loss.
If Harris hadn't said on the campaign posters, gender affirming surgery for all prisoners, whether or not they want it, we're just reassigning the gender of every single prisoner in the United States. I think she shouldn't have ran on that. I personally think it was a mistake.
Listen, force femme the convicts.
Yeah, exactly. I just think force femme was a bad slogan for the campaign.
I think everybody's kind of circling back to their priors. Everybody who is transphobic to, this week has been going, this is our chance to ditch the trannies. And you saw, Helen Lewis in The Atlantic. You saw Matt Iglesias on his very boring blog. You saw Hadley Freeman in The Guardian. Hers was particularly hilarious because she's like, everybody who brings this back to their pet issues is an idiot. And then she's like, but actually it was about my pet issue. And I'm like, you are a dumbass.
I saw a very choice grade A Latinx take today that.
I saw that one too.
Latinx,
oh, Christ.
Which I don't think Kamala Harris or like any elected Democrat has even said publicly since like 2021. And she definitely didn't say it as part of her campaign, which like, say what you want about terminology stuff. Like I complain about terminology fights as much as everybody else, but it's like, they just didn't run on saying like Latinx or on like, we're going to save trans people. Number one priority for the Harris administration is trans rights. Like just factually, that's not the campaign that they ran.
Well, so you have like all the worst people like saying like what they're saying, like Matt Iglesias and Hadley Freeman and all of those people like saying what they're saying. And then you just have like, I lost my complete train of thought. Fuck this election, man. I had a good point and I lost my election.
Back to Elmo.
I lost my thought. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, that's what they want, right? Like they want me to go back to Elmo. They only
this is the thing. Yeah.
To watch Elmo and not to participate in society.
It is objectively bad that everybody feels so disillusioned and unplugged, but also at an individual level, I totally get it. And that's also where I am mentally. But like, this is a very bad thing collectively.
Yeah.
I
mean, the first time Trump was elected, everybody was kind of fired up, and you saw it like right away when they started deporting Muslims and people showed up at the airport. There's going to be nobody at these airports now.
Yeah. Is there even going to be a march like during the inauguration like there was last time? It's like, I hope so, but everybody's just so sick of this fucking guy. This is my biggest beef of just like, we have to think and talk about this fucking guy for the next 4 years. And I realize journalists are not like the key victims of this administration at all. But that was the first place my brain went to, was just like, oh, another 4 fucking years of this shit. Just like on a social level, I'm so sick of talking about it. I'm so sick of thinking about it. I want the country to be better.
Did you happen to see the John Oliver segment before the election where he was like, Trump is actually a pretty objectively funny guy. Like he says stupid and funny things that are legitimately humorous. And he's like, I would like to go back, or I would like to go to a time where like we can just treat this guy as a source of entertainment and not have to worry about him anymore. And we just didn't do that.
Unfortunately, people like the terrible people and they don't like the nice ladies. And here we are.
I'm half torn between like empathy for my fellow journalists and rage at them.
Like
even like NPR or like I think it was 1A was just platforming, like whoever is the editor in chief of the Bulwark was on, and so she was talking about like the whole like, well, and the trans this and the blah 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 that, and to his credit, like the host was like, well, like that was transphobic, but then I think he said something like, well, like she's got to play to like the suburbs and to like the rural areas, like there's no fucking trans people that live there, like we don't give give a shit about like people's like full lives. Like with all the cities are full of like trans people and abortions, which actually sounds like great, but it's not
trans
that
abortions.
way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like we're in this take cycle where people are kind of indifferent. Like even the take with the Latinx, like Democrats shouldn't have said Latinx, had like a paragraph where it was like, to be sure, Harris never actually said Latinx on the campaign trail. But it's like, okay, so you know that the entire point of your article is false. Like there's just no point in writing this, but you're writing it anyway. And there is this kind of, I think we saw that in the run up to the election, like this bizarre indifference to facts where it's like, well, Harris is being attacked for these things and it is false, but these attacks might move the polls. Like this weird meta commentary, which, I think if I'm going to change anything going forward, I think like most of us, I spend a lot of my time complaining about the New York Times and other kind of mainstream media sources. It's not clear to me how much influence mainstream media sources have at this point. I think people do read the New York Times, but kind of you see it, you read it when somebody shares it on social media, either to say like, I agree with this fact or like, I disagree with this take, but people are not going to like the New York Times homepage or like in this centralized way. I think the information environment is so fractured and people are getting a ton of information without really identifying where that information is coming from. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't mean I think that the New York Times doesn't matter because I think it's a mover of elite opinion, but also among voters, like the number of people who appear to have voted on just false information is really alarming. And I don't know that better coverage in the New York Times would have actually changed anything because those aren't the articles that get shared.
I don't think people are paying for the New York Times.
Yeah. Everything's paywalled. Yeah. And nothing's paywalled on the right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of a problem. I also saw something interesting the other day, and I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize for not being able to send it to you. But it was talking about the gender split in social media consumption, where like they're doing some preliminary surveys on this that conclude that women get the majority of their political news from TikTok for the most part, and then men are getting information from Twitter, Reddit, and podcasts more than anything else.
Okay, I don't know which one of those I think is worse, but okay.
If you see the nuclear takes, I don't know how to fix it. I don't have an idea about going forward. All I know is that, like, I don't think trans people lost the election for Harris.
No.
I wanted to point out this one particular poll. I sent it to you before we started recording by this place called Blueprint. They had voters go through and like rate how much they agreed or disagreed with the statement that Blueprint gave them. And one of them was Kamala Harris is focused more on cultural issues like transgender issues rather than helping the middle class. And this is the poll that I keep seeing quoted in all of the like anti-trans screeds, like all of the blame trans people like op-eds. And I just wanted to say, like, they asked individually about different issues like immigration, such and such and such and such. And this is the only one that presented like an issue versus middle class concerns. So I feel like they wanted a certain conclusion.
Yeah.
Because
when you phrase the question a certain way, you're going to get a certain conclusion.
If you feel like Harris was not focused on the middle class and you answer yes to that, but you don't really care about trans people, it's going to look like you're like being like, fuck trans people.
Right. I think it matters what the perceptions are. Like, I think kind of looking back and like, well, what did people think Kamala Harris was running on? I think that stuff matters. But then I think we then have all these journalists who are saying like, well, she shouldn't have run on cultural issues. And like, that's just false. Like if
she didn't run on cultural
people
issues.
Believe something that is false. And I think that is a much, I think like more important and more troubling thing to reckon with, that like the policies that she ran on don't appear to have mattered. Her campaign rhetoric does not appear to have mattered. And all these people have this idea that like she abandoned the middle class and that she's ran on like, we're going to do prison surgeries for trans people, et cetera. Like it just isn't true. And so a country where people voted on false beliefs, it's like you have to reckon with that. But the blame doesn't lie with the person who didn't do the things that they're being accused of. I think that's the thing to stay focused on.
Yeah, it's been documented pretty well that Harris mentioned trans people by name like twice throughout the entire campaign.
Yeah.
And then the ads that Trump was running was, I think, a video of her from 2019. I remember this because I covered the event that she gave this quote in for Vox at the time. And the issue at the time, this is in the middle of the 2020 Democratic primary, right in the middle of the first bathroom panic, right? So this is the political environment that she was dealing with. And like everybody on the progressive side of things looked at trans issues as like the next civil rights issue. So all of the candidates had to like show themselves to be supportive of trans people in some way. And one of the big question marks on Harris's primary campaign was the fact that she fought for the state of California against providing gender affirming care for prisoners, which was a big issue at the time. And trans people didn't trust her. This is why K-Hive hates me, because I said trans people don't trust her. And then they're like, Caitlin Burns is a racist. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was the context for which she provided that answer. And it turned into $200 million in ads. But it wasn't even this cycle that she said it. And I think if she could go back, she'd be like, no, fuck those guys.
Yeah. And it's also not like a priority for her campaign. It's basically like one sentence out of context from an interview. And the whole thing of like, you have to take her out of context to pretend that this was in some way the centerpiece of her campaign. I mean, what's frustrating is like she really ran the campaign that all of the writers for the New York Times op-ed page wanted her to run. They're like, oh, they should tack to the center. They shouldn't forget about the working class. They should talk to the real concerns of people. They shouldn't emphasize race and gender. She never mentioned race and gender. You can tell that she was trying to downplay this. She didn't do any like glass ceiling, we're breaking the glass ceiling bestie type of shit. She ran the campaign that they wanted her to run, and we're still getting this avalanche of takes that like, why didn't she tack to the center? And whatever you think about it, that was the strategy. You can argue that was the wrong strategy, but you have to start out by just acknowledging that was the strategy.
I mean, she did a campaign event with Liz Cheney in Ripon, Wisconsin, which is where the Republican Party was founded in the 1800s. Like,
yeah. And the whole thing of like, she's going to put a Republican in her cabinet and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I feel like most of the left was kind of willing to hold their nose and vote for her anyway, even though we found this stuff distasteful. But like, it just is like, to have a take on what should have happened, it's like, you do need to start with like basic facts.
She ran a Bret Stephens campaign, and oh my God, it lost.
Oh,
yeah. And Bret Stephens hates her. She's getting no reward for this at all.
Yeah.
And also no reflection on, well, should Democrats continue to do this? I think there's a real like empirical question about whether these kind of tack to the center campaigns work. I don't think it's like an answered question. I mean, it sort of worked in 2020. So you can argue that like not that long ago, this did work, and not that many people shifted. I mean, I know the whole country shifted to the right, but it's like, I think this happens every election where people draw a trend line out from whatever the most recent result is. So in 2020, Biden wins, and it's like, Trumpism is over. We can put that to rest. We can close the book on Trumpism. We don't ever have to worry about it again. And then now we're getting this, where like, I think it's only like 1 million people or something changed their vote in this election. It's not that many people, but we're now getting like, things are over for the left. The left has to completely change. And it's not clear to me that these things can't switch back in 4 more years. I mean, this is kind of the 50-50 country that we live in. That is one of the few kind of causes for hope, is that it's not that long ago that Democrats won an election. So it's not like everything is over, but it's like everyone just has to write their takes as if like this is the last election that's meaningful.
There are so many thoughts like just swirling through my head. If this is the multiverse, who's Spider-Man?
Who's animated? Who's real? Is Tobey Maguire still emo?
Wait,
unclear.
People can't see me, but like, let me like shoot out my takes. Like, shh.
That's also what feels so pointless about this whole thing. Is like, yeah, we don't really know. People wish that she had run further to the left. I would love it if her policies were more left wing. It's not clear to me that people were hearing about her policies.
Right. That's the thing. And we talked about that last night, Kate and I, like this whole like balance between like policy and perception. Like I wanted her to run much farther to the left on policy. But like you were saying just a minute ago, like, are people listening? Was that message even getting out there? Like, I don't watch sports ball, right? Yeah. So like, I wasn't aware that there was like some fucking transphobic nightmare of a ad that just kept playing like over and over, like while all of these like young men's eyeballs were on the television and like that they're listening to like these just like totally misogynistic podcasters. I'm that's what scares me more than him, that like that there is this like hard turn to hatred as opposed to like a hard right turn. I don't know. And I mean, like, listen, like we know all of this stuff has always been here, right? Like the only time Trump hasn't won or like that the results have not been clear, like immediately is when a white man ran against him. Like with Hillary, we knew that night. And with Kamala, we knew that night. And so like the misogyny that we've seen and like what Black women have to experience in this country, like that is not new. I did think that I thought she would beat him just because like Hillary, when she debated him, used like facts, and at least Kamala came with flair. I don't want to talk about what Joe Biden did on the stage. So like I thought like maybe facts and flair could beat him, but I don't think anything can beat his flair, especially when it is being laundered by the mainstream media, but then really amplified and like coming into like the eyes and the brains of like, I don't know, the young boys and the men. Like, I don't believe in the gender binary, but I'm scared as shit about that, especially like as a parent and, you know, like as a woman in this country.
Also how kind of like inchoate it was too, in that the whole campaign felt like he was just saying, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you. And people are like, he doesn't really mean it. He'll be fine. He'll be stable. He'll stand up to Putin. It'll be good. And then Harris was going, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. And people are like, she doesn't mean it. She's not really going to help me. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that she's like a woman of color. Like that, it's weird how much that has been downplayed. I think the basic trust issue. But then I also think it's because she was part of the current administration. That also is a huge, like she can't run against the administration that she's a part of. And she can't say like, oh yeah, the last 4 years have really fucked over working people. I mean, you just can't do that as the vice president. Or maybe you can, but then it then becomes this like Dems in disarray, whatever thing. I think those are the sort of the two structural weaknesses, but it's like, I think she could have proposed all kinds of great left-wing policies, and I don't think those would have broken through. And also I don't think people would have trusted her to implement them. Right. And so it might not have moved the needle. Again, it's a multiverse thing, but it's like the indifference to policy, and also just like, I guess we got to run like a tedious white dude to just like say shit. And it doesn't really matter what they say. It's just like, he's an outsider and he's credible or whatever. And that's kind of all that matters.
Yeah. I do find the economic arguments kind of interesting, actually.
Is this where you're getting to my skeets? You're like the things that you said on the internet are garbage.
So you skeeted like something along the lines of, do the people saying Harris had no plan for the middle class realize her campaign website is still online and there's a whole comprehensive plan, which...
The literal only policy document she produced was called The Way Forward or A New Way Forward for the Middle Class.
And it mentions like LGBT people once, and it's like, I'm going to pass the Equality Act, and that was it. So I thought that was funny, but partly I thought it was funny because nobody ever reads the campaign website.
No, of course. I mean, look, everyone has been yelling at me about that for like 3 days now. But also, like, it's not like her stump speech. It's not like her policies on her website were all like about economic bread and butter stuff. And then her campaign speech was like, we're starting with the transgenders. Like it's the same sort of thing. It's the same kind of messaging that she was also producing on the stump. It's the same kind of thing. Every time people, like interviewers, would try to trap her in this cultural stuff because that was a pre-existing narrative, she would come back to like, well, grocery prices are really high. Like, it's just, to me, it's a symbol of the kind of campaign that she ran. She just didn't run on like culture war stuff. She ran on bread and butter economic stuff. And I don't think her policies were particularly like great. Honestly, I think they could have been more inspiring, but also considering the indifference that everyone has shown to her actual policies, including the national media, it's not clear that would have actually made that much of a difference.
Yeah. There were two things that helped me sort of think this through in a way that I felt readjusted my priors on this, because I was one of those people who was like, all of the economic data says that the country's doing better economically, right? And the first was somebody, God, I wish I still had it, but I saw it when I was writing for the MSNBC election live blog. Not to toot my own horn, but somebody had produced like a list of all of the incumbent parties in all of the countries, all of the Western industrialized democracies.
Yeah. That was in the FT.
Yeah. Every single one of them who had been in power during the inflation crisis got voted out of power. So I was like, okay, so this is like a structural thing that Harris had to overcome, and she didn't, but she actually came closer than most of the parties that got voted out.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then the other thing was I kind of wanted to step outside my takes and think like, okay, if this was like a normal ass election between two like non-homicidal parties, and you can make an argument that both parties have homicidal tendencies. But like if I wasn't voting to literally keep my HRT prescription, would I have voted for change on purely economic terms? And I was thinking like, you know, I lived in DC 4 years ago and I moved to an ostensibly more affordable place and my rent is 40% higher now. And I moved to a place with no public transportation, so I had to buy a car, and my health insurance premium is up almost double. And those are my three biggest expenses. So like from a personal standpoint, if I had two normal ass parties that only differed on economics to choose from, I probably would have voted for a change. That's something that the Harris campaign didn't overcome.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately, obviously, her policies are better for people that are concerned about grocery prices than Trump's, right? Like the tariffs thing is completely deranged. But also, most people in the country don't follow politics the way that we do. And so you're like, okay, well, there's this lady who's part of the current administration. A sandwich has gone from $10 to fucking $20 over the course of the last 5 years. And so this lady's part of the people that did that. And this dude is not part of the people who did that. And so I'm going to vote for this dude. I mean, it does make sense to me at a sort of individual level. I think everyone, the media, I mean, I think everyone could have done a lot more work in trying to explain to people that inflation is a global trend based on supply chain problems. I think it's unfortunate that people are essentially blaming Biden and Harris for something that happened literally everywhere. I mean, it's like there's nothing they really could have done about it. But so that to me is like, I don't give the media any awards for like basically failing to explain that. But also, if you're not somebody who reads a lot of economic analysis and who's getting a lot of your information from social media, et cetera, yeah, you go to the grocery store and like every time I go to the grocery store, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like in my head, I'm like, oh, this should be roughly $35. And it's like 55. And I'm like, what? So I get how that just like produces a lot of anger in people, even if the statistics indicate people are now making more money. People at the low end of the income ladder are making, like, they have seen the biggest gains. Yeah. It's sort of, again, in the aggregate, although that might not apply to you individually, in the aggregate, things are better and things have been way better for the United States than most of Western Europe. But again, it's like that's not really a comfort to people when they're like, eggs are $9. And you're like, well, actually, the statistics say that you're doing better. Like, it's not a real argument. And you can't base a campaign off that either.
Yeah, I mean, we had, the tax cut for starting a business proposal and the down payment assistance, $25,000 for buying a home from the campaign. And that's all I heard. And I'm like a professional journalist that covers it for a living. And it's like,
yeah, I know.
I think they got to go back to the drawing board on this stuff and try to figure out how to bring the damn rent down. But that introduces its own set of problems because you have people who entirely subsist on the equity in their homes. And if you bring rent down, their property...
The housing crisis is a benefit to homeowners and a negative to renters. And that's like, given it's roughly 50-50 in most American cities, that's like a huge problem because anyone who owns a home thinks rising housing prices are great. So
yeah, I mean, my feeling is eventually the bubble's going to pop and whoever's in office when it does is going to pay the price.
I mean,
if we have another election.
Yeah.
We are lucky enough to own a home and, we were thinking about moving and instead we did a small renovation because we have to die here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
We can't move in our neighborhood. I don't want the housing prices to go up anymore because we really have to die in this house.
Yeah. I mean, Harris was proposing various things like improving building more to bring supply online. I mean, you can argue that some of these things would have done it. And also like Trump's plan to bring housing costs down is to deport 20 million people, which won't do anything and will make everything worse. So it's like, it's this weird conundrum where it's like on every single issue, it's like, yeah, the Democrats could have proposed more. Like, I wish Harris had been more aggressive. But on the other hand, A, Trumps are worse. And B, people have, it's not clear that a better or more ambitious policy would have actually moved the needle because people don't know about policy. So it's sort of on two grounds, it's sort of irrelevant what the policy was, which is very dire for democracy. Like, it just doesn't matter. And what actually matters is people's like vibe. Like, she had the vibe of someone too far left and too shifty, and he had the vibe of like a successful businessman. But that's not really something you can like do anything about.
That is not the vibe I get from Trump.
No, I know. I genuinely do not fucking understand people who think who get a good vibe from him.
New Jersey. He bankrupted Atlantic City. I mean, like, go fuck yourself.
I get like a used car salesman vibe from him, but maybe I'm just more allergic to that kind of vibe than other people are. Just like he's just like
the bullshit detector is just always going off. That's what like does like, can we get like a more convincing huckster, I guess, is like the question. And for some reason, it's just always fucking him. Yeah.
Or someone, I mean, I honestly think like Bernie is by far the best communicator in the entire Democratic Party. Just like an angry old dude who like doesn't even fly first class. Like, you need people like this. And he's extremely convincing when he goes on his little rants and he doesn't do these like focus group, like little clever, bumper sticker slogan things. You need other people who are really good at communicating in that way. And also people who are like acceptable to like middle America. You need people who middle Americans are not going to think are like threatening, but then the minute they're in office, they do pass a lot of like insanely ambitious policy. This is also what we're missing.
I thought Tim Walz was like the guy. I know. I thought he was the guy.
I kind of still think that he is. I don't know that. I don't know how much blame we want to place on him for this. I hope that he sticks around. I think that he's like a really exciting politician, and like that's exactly the model that I think people should replicate. That the minute you get into office, you're like, we're just going to do a ton of dope shit. Yeah. And it's people love this. Free school lunches, like, come on.
I think Andy Bashir fits that mold. Also,
yes.
In Kentucky. Yeah. I can talk. I'm a professional wordsmith.
Well, this kind of like also just like when we pivoted a little bit to like what we could do better, or like what the work is, like what the work is that needs to be done, whether that's by all of us as like, I would say voters, but really like, I'm just thinking about all the mutual aid shit that needs to get done. Like, I'm thinking about all the Band-Aids on bullet holes that need to get put on, everything that we can do in our power. And then also like these larger structural things, like with the Democratic Party, with, I don't know, with wherever we want to go as a country. Like, I want to hear like what you two think about what we can do.
Complaining online.
How we can.
I plan to do nothing. That's my ceiling. I will continue to complain online. That's about it. So can't think of anything else.
I will admit that I did look up and write down the like formula to make bathroom estrogen.
Oh yeah, you told me about this.
Oh God, really? Can you do that?
Yeah.
Is it safe?
I don't know.
I get why people are doing it, but it's also like.
But this is where we're headed. This is the Helen Lewis model of transitioning.
God. Fuck me.
I know, it's really depressing that that's what we've come to, but it's totally understandable. I have. For whatever reason, I have a lot of friends that are government workers here in Seattle. And like, I think the conversation among them, I mean, it's easy for me to say because I'm not one of them, but the conversation has to be like, how do we run out the clock? And how do we keep Trump from doing stuff and just like delay? Like, let's get another assessment on this and like maybe a legal challenge here and there. It's like, try to run out the clock till 2026. We'll see what happens. And then try to run out the clock till 2028. I think that kind of needs to be the conversation, sort of logistically. Yeah. How do we slow stuff down? How do we file lawsuits? How do we gum up the works so that things don't happen?
I'm in DC, so we saw some of that last time too, like at all the federal agencies. Whoever stayed, I'm not usually one for institutionalists, and whoever, like whichever civil servant stayed, like I just like thanked God for them every day because it's the only reason like why these shit things didn't go through. And then like you saw a complete brain drain at the State Department that we're still recovering from. And like, that's why like the State Department's like not good on like Israel-Palestine policy because like the people that we needed there who maybe were even like more leftist but institutionalists are not there. Right. So I need people to like hang on, everyone. If you work for the government, hang on.
So I saw the most hilarious conversation the other day, and maybe I'm revealing a bit too much about my YouTube consumption habits, but I watched it, a conversation between Hassan Piker and this right-wing streamer who I think even interviewed Trump on a stream, this guy. And it was Hassan being like, why did you vote for Trump? Let's talk about it. And the part that sent me was Hassan was like, well, so like, you're okay with the tariffs? And the guy's like, what's a tariff?
Nice. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And this is a guy who interviewed Trump. And so Hassan's like, well, you do merch, right? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, where do you source your t-shirts? He's like, and Hassan's like, I source from an American Union shop because that fits my ideals. But I imagine you don't do that. And he goes, no. He goes, I get some from America, some from Pakistan, and some from China. And Hassan very calmly explains exactly what's going to happen to all of the t-shirt stock that he imports from China. And then the guy goes, I don't think a tariff works that way. Yep. And it's like, what the fuck are we supposed to do with that?
I'm going to hurt you. And people are like, he won't hurt me. I mean, that's the thing. Is like, how do you address stuff like this?
How do you solve that?
Yeah. Other than like shaking people by the lapels. I mean, like, fucking listen to me.
That's like literally watching somebody redefine a fact. Like that's a fact.
Yeah.
How do you ask, what is a tariff? And then go, I don't think tariffs work that way.
You didn't think it was basic structure. That's like Wikipedia, like first sentence of the Wikipedia page. What is a tariff?
I don't know how to get through to people like this. Like, how do you even begin to solve larger problems when people can't get past this? Like, I learned what a tariff was in like 10th grade because I paid attention in social studies. And I'm like this. I've come to the horrible realization that I think I might have been the only person paying attention in that social studies class.
I will also say another trope that I feel like really needs to die is this whole thing of like, we need to understand the Trump voters. We need to stop being so condescending. Like, I
don't care.
What was it yesterday? The other day, I accidentally went on a date with a Trump supporter from like the internet. I did not know that he was a Trump supporter, obviously, but then he shows up. I figure out like within like 2 seconds, I'm like, how are you holding up this week? He's like, I'm great because I voted for Trump. I was like, okay. But then I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll sit down with somebody I disagree with. Like, whatever, let's talk about it, right? We can have a like adult conversation about this. And I was like, okay, well, tell me why you voted. This is a gay guy. I'm like, tell me why you voted for Trump. And his whole thing was like, well, the First Amendment is really important to me. And when Democrats come after the First Amendment, I knew that I couldn't vote for them. And I was like, okay, well, when did they come after the First Amendment? Like, what was the event that sort of made you change your mind? And he's like, the First Amendment is just a really founding principle in this country. I'm like, right, okay, so what specifically are Democrats doing about the First Amendment? He's like, liberty is founded on the First Amendment. The First Amendment is just so important to me. I'm like, but that's, I don't know about you guys, but like, that's every conversation I've had with a Trump supporter is like, you ask for something, okay, explain to me the support, and you get something fucking vague back. You get something incorrect back, right? You get something like one of these abysmal articles on like undecided voters or like people who switch to Trump. One guy who got interviewed was like, I think Trump has the wherewithal to like stand up to Vladimir Putin. Like he's a strong negotiator. It's like, no, he likes Putin.
No.
His whole fucking thing is liking Putin. It's like, you're just wrong. And so it's not, in my experience, like engaging with Trump voters and doing this whole like performance of concern. It's like, we just need to reckon with the fact that a lot of this is based on false information, kind of weird right-wing propaganda stuff, and just like xenophobia or like, I don't trust a lady president thing. I know that sounds condescending. I know that I'm playing into all the fucking Fox News tropes right now, but it's accurate, right? Like there have been surveys about people with basic factual understanding of like, is the unemployment rate at historic lows right now or historic highs? People who are incorrect about basic facts are like 3 times more likely to vote for Trump. And so if we're going to address what's going on, especially as journalists, we have to start by understanding that like a huge number of people are voting based on either being underinformed or misinformed. People want to take away the racism, misogyny stuff, fine. But what we're left with is people who are voting on false information, right? Who don't know what a fucking tariff is, who have these like Barry Weiss fucking, the guy said his like favorite journalist is Barry Weiss, for fuck's sake.
No.
I left after like 9 minutes. I was like, okay, I've tried, but this just isn't going to go anywhere. Sorry, bud.
Oh my God.
Have a good rest of your day. But anyway, it's like people are just imbibing this garbage. And like, I think it does not help to do this thing of like, we need to understand the economic concerns of people. I think we should help economic concerns of all Americans because that's the right thing to do. But as far as like Trump voters, we need to start with the understanding that like people are voting on bad information or bad beliefs or just it doesn't help to whitewash these people into like, oh, I voted for Trump because I got laid off at the factory. Like that does exist, but it's a tiny percentage of Trump support. And There's been so much academic literature since the 2016 election. Trump voters are one of the most well understood voter movements in American history. We understand extremely well. A lot of it is racial resentment. A lot of it is this kind of seeing the demographics of the counties around them changing. A lot of it is like there's misogyny in there and false beliefs, consumption of right-wing media. It's like, we know what this is. We can't keep going back to the well and being like, no, give me the good reasons you voted for Trump. We just need to admit the fact that there's a lot of people in this country who voted on bad information. I don't know what to do with that. But like, we need to stick with like what we know. And what we know is that this is not a coalition of like economically disaffected poor people. Poor people voted for fucking Democrats. They always do.
I saw the other day that I think it was Trump himself made an announcement where he was like, I'm going to ban the terms mis and disinformation from government.
Oh yeah, that's been a whole thing.
Like,
yeah, whatever. Sure.
I had an experience last night that basically sums up the entire election. So I watched this YouTube video last week that was like, gourmet pizza chefs try frozen pizza.
Oh my God, I watched that too.
Oh my God, yeah. So I was like, oh, this is my jam. I'm going to watch this and maybe try a new frozen pizza, right? Okay. So I watched it, and of course, the pizza that I eat was like the worst.
You ate the Totino's? You're into the Totino's?
No, I didn't. No, it wasn't Totino's, but like the Red Baron thin crust. Okay. And the guy looked at the ingredients and is like, oh, this is like cancer tolerant. I was like, I should probably find a new frozen pizza.
It's just a list of heavy metals.
Yeah. So I tried the Newman's Own because I was like, I know that my they rated it pretty good. It wasn't the best.
He is the salad dressing king.
Store. Yeah. It's true. And he was really hot back in the day.
Unbelievable. Oh, man,
unbelievable.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. So but it's more expensive than the Red Baron. So I bought one of each because I usually buy two for the week so that I don't have to worry about involved cooking. And so last night I was like, oh, I can try the Newman's Own. Like, this is perfect. I was all excited. Get it out, put it in the pan, like put it in the oven. It cooks up. It's beautiful. It smells amazing. It's golden brown. I'm like, this is going to be the best night ever. And I take my spatula and I go and try to get it out of the oven. And as I'm pulling it out, it flips over upside down in my oven. Cheese first.
Oh.
And that is the closest feeling I've had to watching election night returns.
Yeah. Yeah. That moment too, where you're like, you see what's happening and then you're like, I guess I'll get a paper towel. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did salvage some of it. I lost 95% of the cheese, but the crust and the tomato sauce was actually pretty good. So I'm going to try.
So you can confirm that it was a good frozen pizza.
Yes, and I don't have to wait till 2029 for that.
Oh God, yeah. I will. My frozen pizza trauma was when I was in middle school and me and my brother smoked a lot of weed. We would like make frozen pizzas. We get super high and watch Conan O'Brien at like 2 a.m. and make frozen pizzas. God. And one time we were so high that we put the pizza, I think it was a Red Baron. We put it in the oven with the plastic still on it. We were just like so out. He thought like, I don't even know how, I think it was my brother's fault. And just like black smoke like filled filled the kitchen. And so ever since then I've been like a little bit off of the frozen pizzas.
And to complete the metaphor, the United States will now fill with black.
I mean, that's smoke. Also, see, we got it. We got there.
Thank you so much for coming on. I know that.
Thank you.
Like trying to talk through this stuff like so close to the election is just not fun.
I hate it. I hate punditry. I hate doing punditry. I hate reading other people.
We appreciate having
Thank you.
I think we needed the cancel Gunkle. Honestly.
Yeah, if I'm going to process this with anybody, I'm glad that it was with you.
Yeah.
It's not fun, but we're fun. And together we're going to provide people with a little bit of levity and, you know, some harsh truths and some levity.
I will say, I mean, there's been a lot of like how you holding up texts going around between like me and my friends, which has actually been kind of nice. It's been like a reason to reconnect with people and sort of ask in this sort of mutual aid way, like, are there things I can be doing for you that you need right now? And I mean, I think everybody was struggling anyway, and this is just like an extra reason. And so I think if there's one thing we can do, it's just like to take care of each other.
Yeah, make sure your neighbors and your friends are good.
Yeah, for sure. Group hug, everyone.
All right, Christine, it's that time again. It is time for out of context cancellations. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
This week we have a very specific theme. as you might imagine. But yeah, our listeners obviously venting some frustration through our Discord. If you want to join it, details are on our Patreon. We're going to start with, we're canceling people who insist the economy is good.
Yeah, just because the economy is good at a structural level doesn't mean that it's working for each of us.
Yeah. Maybe a rising tide doesn't lift all boats. Or maybe the tide isn't coming in fast enough. I don't know. I'm tired of metaphors.
I'm drowning in the metaphor, in the rising tide of fascism.
Next, we're canceling blame the marginalized o'clock.
100%. Gee, I wonder what this one's about.
Yeah, it's funny. Seeing like Seth, we didn't get into it in the interview, but like Seth Moulton, the Democratic representative from my state of Massachusetts, coming out trying to throw trans people under the bus. I almost moved to his district, and if I had, I would be announcing my primary this week against him.
I think that you could wipe the floor with him in a primary.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of bad tweets in my past that might be exploited, but he made me mad enough to want to run for something, actually. If
you have that much hate about a marginalized group, you should not be in office when you are theoretically supposed to represent, not to like all lives matter it, like you represent all people. They all matter. Get your fucking shit together, Seth Moulton.
We talked about this a lot during the interview, but we're canceling impossible information silos.
Yes. How do we build one?
We don't need a silo. We need like a granary that's open.
No, that's really good idea.
These metaphors, Jesus Christ.
I think it's good. Has anyone ever asked if you're a professional writer?
No, never.
I think the granary idea is actually really good.
We need like a communal oven. We don't need a silo. We just need like a fucking pub.
Oh, I like that. We all gather there.
And lastly, it's time. Cancel the United States.
Well, it is the real shithole.
Are we a shithole country? I think there's an argument that we always have been.
We're definitely always been a shithole country. That's not in question.
And this is why Harris lost, Christine.
Oh, well. Thank you for educating me.
Oh, God. I am tired of comforting the fucking stupid.
Yeah, that's Are we going to see that now? Like, now that there is this mass exodus from the app formerly known as Twitter to Bluesky, are we just going to see some of this just like worst performances recreated here? Or is Bluesky still this kind of like safe place for us all to engage in a more like constructive way?
Well, so far the foundations are pretty good. And the thing that I've been telling everybody joining Bluesky is like, we don't do dunking there. Like, you don't want to dunk on a bad take. You just block and move on. And you might not get that endorphin rush of like people coming in and praising you for dunking on that bad take. But God, you suffocate the oxygen away from those people coming in. And this is our one shot at it. So you see a bad take, just block and move on. Block and move on.
I really like this idea.
Yeah. And that has been Out of Context Cancellations. If you want to support the show, and you can do so by subscribing to The Fly Trap. And also, we would really love it if you could go leave a review of the pod on Apple right now, especially with Christine coming into the show. We haven't had a review, I think, in the last year. So starting to get those pumping again. Let us know how we're doing. That would be a really big help. All right, Christine, what do you got for your Ombudsman's Mom Corner?
Those long, big sighs that Michael had when he first came on the podcast. There's no one take I can even single out because they're just coming so fast. It's just the media, which is an amorphous term that, like, you know, the guy who's going to be president uses a lot. And I don't like saying things like the media because I do understand, if there are any journalists here, I do understand how hard your job is. I have done that job with you. And all of that said, I understand that the issues are structural, that the messaging is coming up from on high. You do have an individual role to play on this. And when there are enough journalists who cowered for their lives on January 6th, who helped launder Trump back into office and are still writing these articles or, releasing these audio segments or podcasts saying like, well, let's understand the Trump voter, and this is why she lost because she didn't focus on blah, 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 with just no mention of or a complete downplaying of what Trump is set to do. I just feel crazy. And that's not a word I really want to be using either. That's just me kind of in my feels about the media this week. That's what your ombudsman has to say. I'd love to know what Kate has to say as a fellow journalist and astute critic of the media.
My feeling this week has been that I think there's too much information, which feels really weird because there's been so much consolidation of the media industry. But I feel like between social media and the actual media, there's so much information coming. There's not to go back to metaphors, which we already said we're tired of, but like trying to drink from a fire hose. And at this point, I think a lot of people are shielding themselves from the fire hose because there's just so much of it coming that they can't absorb it. And I remember, back in my childhood, there was four major news networks. And that was it. There was no Twitter. There was no, internet for anything. So like whatever came through there is what people ended up responding to. And now you have 1 million of those, more than 1 million of those. I mean, every individual social media account is potentially a source of information. And we don't really have an information distribution system anymore. And I'm going to be spending a lot of time thinking about that over the next 4 years.
Yeah. One of the most prescient things that Mike said is that all of these takes right now are malleable. Mm-hmm. Or did you say that? Or did we all kind of come to that conclusion? I think we all kind of came
to that conclusion, yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. It is okay to keep posting through it, and it's okay to be wrong. And it doesn't mean that's cancelable. It just means like we're all trying to figure this out right now. So what you said about like people are coming at this from their priors, right? I think that we have to be malleable about our priors and just basically hour by hour, day by day.
Yeah, I agree. And having said that, Cancel Me Daddy will be right here through all of this. And I have a feeling there's going to be a need for a podcast like ours. We're offering good, smart analysis about what's happening not only in the government, but in media. So we appreciate all your listeners. And if you appreciate us as well, give us a shout on social media. We want to know who has stuck around with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for your support. And we are there to support you too.
Cancel Me Daddy is a Flytrap Media production, and today's show is made by me, Caitlin Burns, my incredible co-host, Christine Grimaldi, and our amazing editor, Maria Paleologos.
D. Peter Schmidt made our theme song, and Eden M.W. designed our graphics.
Our show is made possible by the incredible cancelers supporting our work, especially the members of our Canceler Hall of Fame, with the great power to cancel all their enemies. Meg.
We appreciate your support.
Happy canceling.